All right, welcome back. It's Esther McGinnis again, and I'm going to talk about microgreens. Oh, this has become oh so trendy, even more trendy than the kale that Tom was talking about. Well, some of you may ask, why would I want to eat microgreens when I have been successfully growing sprouts for all these years? You know, alfalfa sprouts and radish sprouts. And indeed, I used to grow alfalfa and radish sprouts, really enjoyed the flavor, and it was something fun to do in the middle of winter. You know, something that was green and that you could grow in a week or less with very little equipment. I used to use just a jar and some cheesecloth. But I have been hearing that sprouts are no longer safe to eat. So we have the Center for Disease Control, and they have been keeping track of foodborne outbreaks across the United States. And you can see since 2009, there have been many outbreaks that have been linked to alfalfa sprouts, bean sprouts, clover, and other kinds of sprouts. So they're finding E. coli contamination, salmonella, and listeriosis. Now, since 1996, there have been over 30 reported outbreaks, and this has resulted in deaths. This has resulted in a lot of hospitalizations. So this caused me to rethink eating sprouts. The problem with alfalfa and other kinds of sprouts is that bacteria reside on the seed's surface. Now, you can try and disinfest the seed, but you cannot necessarily kill all the bacteria. And that's because if you looked at the seed surface under a microscope, you would see that the seed coat is not smooth. It has lots of nooks and crannies, and that's where the bacteria like to hide. So even if only a few of the bacteria survive, think about how you grow sprouts. You grow them in a warm, moist environment, and that's conducive to those bacteria growing extremely rapidly. So the FDA has categorized alfalfa sprouts as a potentially hazardous food. Who knew? So the FDA recommends that the following individuals avoid raw sprouts: children, the elderly, pregnant women, and people with immune-compromised conditions. Now, if you cook with sprouts, the cooking process does kill the harmful bacteria, but most of us like to eat our sprouts raw. So this is when I started to get into microgreens. And I have to admit, I'm a little on the trendy side when it comes to culinary trends. I like to try things a little bit different. And microgreens are being served at some of the fancier restaurants. I mean, even here in North Dakota, you're starting to see it. They're extremely nutritious, they're easy to grow, and most importantly, there's a much lower risk of foodborne illnesses. So what's the difference between sprouts and microgreens? Well, with a sprout, you're essentially eating a germinated seed. So you're eating the whole sprout that includes the seed, the root system, the stems, and those cotyledons. And you're growing the sprouts in that water. So any bacteria is transferred, from the seed to all parts of the sprout. Microgreens, a little bit different. So you grow microgreens in a potting soil. The seed is buried and you do not consume the seed. Instead, you grow the microgreen until you actually see the first set of true leaves, and then you trim the microgreens right above the soil line and you eat the stem and the leaves. Now, microgreens, as a result, are not labeled as a potentially hazardous food. So with microgreen supplies, extremely easy. You don't have to go and buy anything fancy. I just went out to my garage and I found some disposable roasting pans. You know, those aluminum roasting pans that we have for when we're making a turkey. Those work great. Or if you have a seed starting flat at home, perfect. I've even seen people use takeout containers or those little plastic containers that lettuce comes in. Now, what you need, though, is a flat tray. You don't need the individual cells. But the important thing is it must be clean. Then start with a brand new potting soil. Don't reuse soil. Don't get soil from your garden. And definitely don't use compost or manure. So you start off with new potting mix, and then you won't have to worry about any contaminants. Now, as far as microgreens, there are so many different varieties that are conducive to growing under these conditions. So a lot of your leafy greens, your arugula, the peas, kale, mustard, beets, Swiss chard, and then some of your herbs like basil are great. You can try other seeds like radishes, which are a little bit spicier, and then the peas. The pea microgreens are just oh so tasty. Now, I would not recommend growing lettuce. Lettuce is going to be a little bit too delicate, so stick with some of the other leafy greens. To be safe, make sure your seeds are not treated with some form of fungicide. You would know it because it would have that colorful coating on it. Seeds. Now, these can be purchased almost anywhere. You're seeing them in your local garden centers. If you want to purchase them online, Johnny's Selected Seeds has a great selection of them. If you're going to be doing this on a large scale, though, it is cheaper to buy in bulk, so you can save yourself a little money. Now, with planting, extremely easy. So you moisten the potting soil and then you spread it in the container, just spreading it evenly to a depth about of 1.5 inches. And then you broadcast the seed on top of that. You're going to be broadcasting this at a higher density than you would expect because you want this flat to be jam-packed with all these microgreens. Now, in general, follow the recommendations on your seed packets. It's usually like 10 or 12 per square inch. With the peas, you would go a little less dense because the plants are, in fact, a little bit larger. To have success with pea microgreens, soak them for 8 hours to help them germinate better and then plant them. Now, some people will cover their seeds with a light dusting of potting soil. The key here is not to go too deep, maybe 1/8 inch, but I've also heard that some individuals don't even bother to cover their seeds as long as they keep their seeds well hydrated. So you can water with a spray bottle and then cover it. If you're using a seed flat that has a dome, that's a natural covering. Otherwise, you can use saran wrap or a plastic wrap like I did. That worked perfectly fine. But be careful. You want to carefully monitor your seeds. Once they start germinating, take off that dome or take off that plastic wrap because we don't want to have any fungal or mold growth on our microgreens. So once they start germinating, take off that cover. And then you'll have to be a little bit more careful about watering, making sure they don't dry out. And on the other hand, making sure you don't waterlog them. So be balanced in your watering. As far as growing conditions, extremely easy. Just find a sunny window. If you're a little bit more high-tech, you could grow them under fluorescent lights. Like Tom mentioned, those fluorescent tubes are great, the shop lights. You don't have to go really expensive. You just need to provide a minimum of 4 hours of light, enough to green them up, and then at around room temperature. Now, I've given you a range of temperatures. At 75, they're going to grow faster. At 65, they would grow slower. Timing. So timing's also going to depend on the seasons and on the temperatures. So most of these microgreens you can grow in a 2-week time frame, from seeding to harvest, including some that we have provided to your extension agents. So hopefully some of them have grown the kale, the mild micro mix, the mizuna, the mustard, and the radish. So you're probably seeing samples of that right now. Now, when I grew these samples during the dead of winter, it took 14 days. But at this time of year, you'd find it's actually only going to take 10 days or maybe even a little bit less. And that's due to the warmer temperatures we're having and the fact there's more sunlight. Now, peas will take a little bit more time, but I promise you it's worth it. Absolutely worth it. All right, so I have my assistant here who was helping me grow both kale and pea shoots. So we harvested most of the microgreens when they were about at the 3-inch stage. So the leafy greens, you want them just after that first set of true leaves has unfolded. And then you would just trim that with some scissors. We'll talk about that next. Now with the pea shoots, you can go a little bit taller. We harvested them at the 6-inch mark, and we had a much larger quantity as a result. So with harvesting, my assistant was invaluable. We just took scissors and clipped those microgreens right above the soil line. You do not want to be pulling them out of the soil because you don't want to be consuming the seed. You just want that stem and that set of leaves. And then preparing them. Really easy. It's like lettuce or any other green. You want to be safe. You rinse and dry them. Now, this is going to be most flavorful if you consume them right away, but you can keep them for a couple days in your refrigerator, but, try and use them up quite quickly. Now, you can eat this raw, and in fact, that's where you're going to get your best flavor with these leafy greens, is eating them raw. I like to eat them with a little bit of salad dressing, a little bit of ranch, a little bit of Italian, and it's just perfect. But if you like, you could top your ham sandwich with them. Use them a little like lettuce. Yes, I'm starting to sound like Julia Child here. Put them in your soup. Or if you get really fancy, put a few on top of your entree like they do in the fancy restaurants. All right, they're making fun of me here, so I better move on. Now let's talk about nutrition and taste. I personally like the spicier ones. I like the flavor of radish and mustard and kale. And then I mentioned the pea shoots. Now, some of you may like some that are a little bit more mild. But keep in mind that overall, you're getting a lot of nutrition here. We had a recent USDA study, which found that microgreens in general have 5 times the level of vitamins and carotenoids of a mature plant. So, this is just absolutely fabulous when it comes to food and nutrition, and you can grow this in a matter of 10 to 14 days. It's a win-win situation. Now, you're going to be hearing more about this in the future. You're probably going to start seeing this at farmers markets. So be prepared, be trendy, be bold. All right. So I'll turn the microphone over to Tom, and I bet we're going to be signing off for the evening.
Oh, not so fast. We got a question here.
Oops.
How about when you grow these in trays, should you have drainage holes in the trays?
You can do it either way. Now, I was using what I had at home, which did not have drainage holes, so I was more careful in my watering. I did not want to waterlog them. It is always better to have something that drains, to have a 2-tiered system, so the top flat can drain into something else. That is better. But if you're careful, you can get away without having drainage holes. So it's really up to you.
And then do you have to use fresh potting soil every time?
Yes, I would use fresh potting soil every time when it comes to food safety concerns.
So the sprouts, do they regrow after you cut them?
The sprouts do not regrow after you cut them. Now, the pea shoots look like they were sending up a little bit, but it didn't amount to much. There's just not enough energy in the roots to really regrow much.
Yeah, it reminds you, like when you thin out transplants, whenever we cut, if you cut below the cotyledons, that's it. No regrowth. And with these sprouts, we're cutting below the cotyledons. So there you go. Short, sweet life they provide. Do you have a special variety of peas that you would suggest?
Not a special variety, no. I would just make sure that they were not treated with a fungicide.
Yeah, I noticed when we got some pea cultivars out for people, there's special ones with tendrils. Did you eat, do you like tendrils? You eat pea tendrils? There's some cultivars that
I don't remember which kind they were.
Yeah,
I'd have to take a look.
When I packaged them, I just said tendril pea. Mm-hmm. So when it's 3 to 6 inches tall, do those pea sprouts have tendrils on them already?
I don't remember them having tendrils on them already. No.
Okay. Some McLean County had some tendrils, and they gobbled them up. They like them just like you. There you go. Pierce County got tendrils. Okay, there we go. Okay, who else? So you gotta let them go and it's only been like 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks for those peas. So it
was 2 weeks.
Pretty quick. Mm-hmm. My wife's from Asia. She loves pea tendrils. I'm gonna have to give this a try. Any other questions out there about growing these trendy vegetables? Oh, how about this person has alfalfa seed on hand that they use for sprouts. Can they grow alfalfa as a microgreen instead?
Yes, they can. I think I've tried
Okay,
that.
great. Any last questions here about microgreens? I'm so nice to see everybody planting them, and all the students out there. You've got your package of microgreens that you can go home and follow Esther's advice and have some trendy veggies in a couple weeks. Okay, with that, thank you, Esther. That was really interesting, and so nice a new vegetable that we can all try in our garden or in our indoor garden.